I welcome all of you to this session being conducted by Dr. Lars Sorqvist. I have known Lars for maybe 20, 25 years and have met him around the world because he is a speaker not only in Sweden, all over Europe, USA. He was a board member of ISQ, China. We have heard him speak at all these places. He's been in the field of quality for over 30 years. Currently, he leads an organization, Sandom Associates, which celebrated 50 years a couple of years ago. So one of the oldest organizations in Europe professionally in the field of quality management, training, consultancy. I highly respect the programs all over Europe and other parts of the world as well. And also, Lars is the president of International Academy for Quality, which is the apex organization in the world for quality professionals, where the membership is only by invitation. So I got to know him even better when I was the president of IAQ and he was a board member. He was also the chairman of the examining committee, which is a very strong committee to determine who should become a member. Because membership is only by invitation. It just can't apply. And now currently as president of IAQ, he is taking it to new heights, along with his colleagues, doing many new and innovative things. We were supposed to be in Portugal next week, where IAQ has a next general body meeting. But unfortunately, I couldn't get the visa. I can't make it. Sorry, Lars. I would have loved to be there. You've created an excellent program. I read about it, and I'm going to miss hosting at your home a get-together of IAQ participants. Maybe another time I'll catch up with you. Lars is also associated with many universities in Europe, China, and elsewhere. He also is a lecturer as a professor in various universities. Really an outstanding knowledge and experience in the field of quality management. We're fortunate to have him speaking to our members. Thank you, Lars, very much for accepting our invitation, even though I know you're so busy with the EOQ conference next week and IAQ. And I recognize preparing for these conferences and these meetings is not easy. Takes a lot of time and effort. And now you're taking your time at 6 a.m, which also is a challenge. I appreciate your commitment to quality that is so evident. It's going to speak to us about supplier aspect in the deglobalization world. The world has changed completely after COVID. From globalization, which was almost 20 years journey in the world, now more of regionalization is happening, country-specific. So in that environment, how do you manage a supply chain and use quality management principles to do so? Is a challenge most companies are facing. So in that context, the topic is very appropriate for the times in which we are. Thank you, Lars, for honoring that. So I won't take any more of your time. I would like you to share your experiences and we'll be happy to learn. My only regret is I won't be able to sit through you because I'm with a client right now in another city. So I thought I'll welcome you, introduce, and then I'll catch up with the video recording that will happen later on. Thank you very much and all the best for your EOQ Congress and the IAQ meeting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Janak, and it has been a pleasure to serve under you in the International Academy for Quality. I think we together have done a lot of important and very interesting and often very funny things too. So it have been a great time with you there, and now I've taken over the presidentship, and I try to follow in your footpath there. Yes, I will just put on my PowerPoint here. Do you see it now?
Yes, it's coming.
Good.
It has come.
Yes, as Janak said here in the introduction, I will talk about supplier relations and quality-based partnership in a time of deglobalization. And I think what Jonas just mentioned, the reason why you couldn't get to Portugal, the difficulty in getting a visa, that's a sad example of what's happening today. Just some years ago, before COVID, things was quite easy, and most people believed in a strong globalization. Now things seems to turn in a completely different direction, and that, of course, also affect the way we are working with suppliers. And I think it's similar all over the world, but from a Swedish point of view, I think we have been maybe even easier for us to absorb these changes because, as you probably know, Sweden is a very, very small country, but with a very, very big industry. We have a high number of really huge international multinational companies that are Swedish or had a background in Sweden. And of course, they are all very much depending on suppliers from all over the planet. And we have also seen big crises in many of those companies the last 2-3 years. Of course, during COVID, we understood it, but now new things are happening. And we could also see, and I think that's very interesting, a big difference how they are affected depending on the supplier strategy they have. And I have some really good example of that from some of the companies I'm working very close to, especially in the truck manufacturing area. Two of my clients that I've been working for many, many years with, that is Volvo and Scania. You might know them. They are two of the biggest truck manufacturers in the world. But we can see so big differences. That's one of the things I based this on, how their different strategy lead to in one of the companies a rather nice situation that works quite okay, and a much bigger problem in the other. So I think we really have to rethink the way we are working with suppliers in this situation that we are in today. So that is what I would like to speak about today. I sadly have a little bit bad voice today because I had a bad cold. Don't worry, because I don't think that kind of virus could turn into internet. That's another kind of virus we find there. But I hope that my voice will last for this 45-minute speech. So let's start. And starting up with some reflection on the traditional supplier relations. Of course, they are different in different organizations, especially on different continents in different cultures. If we, for instance, make a comparison with the more traditional Japanese supplier relation compared to what we have in the United States, is a huge difference. And from a European perspective, we have turned more and more in the direction as the United States. And I see that as quite a big problem, especially in today's situation. It wasn't good before, but it worked. But now we are into new problems here. I don't know all the details about the Indian supplier relations, but you will be able to put yourself on this map later on anyhow. Anyhow, if we look at the traditional situation, or how it was at least before COVID, and that still a high number of companies tried to continue, that doesn't work very well. First of all, most of the power was with the buying organization. The buying organization was the one that decided and also pushed a lot of pressure on the suppliers. Very often the focus was high on finding the lowest prices. Legal agreements and penalties control the situation. Quite often it is also demand, especially in automotive industry and so on, annual decreases in prices. Often there is kind of a bidding between competing suppliers to try to get them to even lower the price more than they do from the beginning. From a quality point of view, focus was a lot on certification and sometimes requirement on specific methods. And typical quality action were inspections, audits, assessments of suppliers, and so on. And usually a quite short time relation was built in this situation. Always trying to find someone cheaper and maybe better, but to a big extent focus was on the price. And another thing that I think is interesting to think about over time, that the meaning of being a supplier had been enlarging. Historically, it was more like a subcontractor or something like that, but there are so many different kind of suppliers that could be different kind of providers, producers, subcontractors, distributors, outsource activities, experts, and last but not least, knowledge suppliers like consultants and staffing and so on. So it's if we look at it in this way, it's a lot of the total value that is created that comes from suppliers. And we have also over time gotten a change in the supply relation that makes us more depending on the suppliers. For quite a long time, we have had a global sourcing, at least in most big companies. The kind of products that are purchased have become more complex. Very often, knowledge is a very important part of that. Instead of just buying parts or material, so we more and more specify functions or entire systems that is even totally developed by the suppliers. We can also see a development towards a longer supply chain with more and more steps. Many of the main companies, they try to decrease the number of suppliers, so they use the first line suppliers that also organize a lot for them. So they, in that way, also keep the contact or lose the contact with the many suppliers further down in the supply chain. And of course, the development towards more lean supply chains makes this more critical, because the use of inventory and so on in stocks is decreased, and of course it's more critical. We have to have supply chains that work continuously all the time. Here are some data from the Scandinavian Automotive Supplier Organization that is organizing all suppliers in the automotive area in Scandinavia, and it's quite a huge organization, as we have a big car and truck bus industry in Scandinavia, and especially in Sweden. And of course, they are also trying to debate those questions. But what we can see is that, as an average, they had calculated that the automotive industry is requiring an average reduction in price around 4%. Customer pays, in some cases, that's Volvo standard, after 90 days. So of course the cash flow to the suppliers are bad. Customer expect innovations and product development from suppliers, and in the Scandinavian automotive industry, around 65% of the total value is coming from subcontractors. So of course they are very important, and a big part of the quality that we can deliver in the end is depending on the suppliers. But looking at this, I sometimes make a comparison with a cash machine. Sometimes we can almost see that big companies try to use their suppliers as a cash machine to improve their own financial situation in a short time way. For instance, the paying time have been increasing, and especially today with a rising interest level, of course, that will be a higher and higher cost for many of those suppliers that get financial difficulties, especially when we have a situation there. Many of them also have to invest a lot in new technology, so that creates problems. We can also see part in the environmental situation, and I will take it in two steps. First, the general development that I personally think is very important to think about, and that's controlled a lot on how we should and need to work with quality. I used to make a comparison and saying that running a business is like walking up an escalator that moves down. It sounds a little bit strange, sounds a little bit boring maybe, but if thinking about it, it's like an escalator. If you stand still in that escalator, you move backwards. To get up, you have to probably run, and if you stand still, you move backwards. And what I mean with this, that any organization acts in an environment there a lot of things are changing all the time. Customer demands are not stable. They are changing a lot over time. Owner demands, the competition situation is changing and getting tougher in many cases. We shouldn't talk about new technology. It's almost exploding today. The economical financial situation is onshore. And of course, we have a lot of issues doing with sustainability and climate changes and so on. And of course, all these things put a high pressure on organizations to improve. So we can see that then accelerating change is driving an accelerating change to improve. And in the situation where we could measure the speed of change, we can see that it's not linear, it's more exponential. And of course, if we should not get in the situation, and as the man on the photo here, trying to run faster and faster, we have to run smarter and smarter. We have to be all the time more and more professional in our way of working with improvements. And of course, this affects not just our own organization, it affects the entire value chain. If we should be able to develop in the way we need, we have to have all our suppliers with us. Especially if we look in branches like I said, automotive industry, there we in Sweden have like 65% of the value coming from suppliers. We can also see a strange situation developing today with a high level of uncertainty. This is from the opening speech of last spring's World Economic Forum in Davos. The founder and the chair of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, started up his speech with talking about that we are living in a world that the economical, environmental, social, and geopolitical crisis are converging and conflicting. So this makes it difficult. So anyway, generally, not just in the supplier area, we have to become more like an agile organization that always are improving. And we have to improve our way of improving and to become more and more professional. And this, of course, also put a new demand, a general demand on quality management, especially as quality management in quite a lot of company has focused a lot on stability. That's still important, of course, having good quality management system and audits and inspections and so on. But now focus has to be stronger and stronger on continual improvements on all levels. So I think the concept, especially of Six Sigma and Lean, is more critical than ever. And it's also very positive to hear. I recently talked to some of my colleagues in the American Society for Quality. I've been on the board there earlier too, and they said that they today in US see an accelerating interest, especially in Six Sigma and Lean, and that makes me happy because that shows that we are on the right path. But if we look at the more specific situation today and the last years, that dramatically influence the way we have to work with suppliers, we could see a number of things that create some kind of disruptive change in the global situation. Started with COVID, that really changed everything. Of course, COVID seems to be over now. We really hope so. But that's not the only thing. We have the climate situation. We have if we can call it the trade war, especially between US and China, that is quite critical. We have the war in Ukraine. And we can see how small accidents like the ship that made a small mistake in the Suez channel really stopped all or a lot of the supply to Europe. I read somewhere that the cost was like $8 or $9 billion a day for European industry due to that small crisis. And we are very friendly, and we have to be very careful. And more people start to think about deglobalization, the opposite to globalization. We can see that due to this situation, companies are moving their suppliers closer and closer. All those reasons, each of them is a reason probably enough for sourcing closer to your business. Especially in Sweden and in Europe, we have a lot of discussion due to the climate crisis and the sustainability situation that companies shouldn't have that long transportation and so on. But all the other things on top of that makes the situation critical. Personally, I'm a strong believer in globalization, so I dislike the situation. But as it is today, I think it's very difficult to handle it in another way. Hopefully, we get back to another situation where people all over the planet can join each other and cooperate, as we had a very good development. But all those things that in just 3-4 years has happened had made a big difference to the situation. And this also, of course, affect the kind of relation or the situation we have with our suppliers, because thinking about it, for a very long time, we have continuously increased the number of possible suppliers that we could source from. If you look from a Swedish point of view, for instance, long time ago, if you go back maybe 200 years ago, most of the sourcing was from your own small village or something like that. It might be the craftsman man on the other side of the road or something. And then we started to source nationally. We get trains, we get ships, and so on. So it was easier. We moved out to Europe. And later on, then the Cold War was over, and the wall was falling. Swedish companies started to source a lot in Eastern Europe, and then we moved to Asia and China and so on, and we become global. But now, when this is changing rapidly, also the amount of possible suppliers is rapidly decreasing, and that makes a big change in the power in the market, because in the old situation that we have before COVID and so. With an increasing number of possible suppliers, of course, it was very easy for the buyer to rule the market. But in the situation we have today, more and more of the power is moving from the buyer to the supplier. And we can see situations where company have difficulty even to get a supplier. And this article is in Swedish. It doesn't matter. It's just you recognize the name of the company, Scania and Volvo, because this is something that has been discussed a lot in Sweden. And due to the situation, having two big truck manufacturers so close to each other, often using exactly the same suppliers, we can also make a very interesting comparison. Just a short background. Scania has a very long tradition with having a relationship with Toyota in Japan. So they had built a completely different way of working with suppliers than most other Swedish companies. It's built on a long-time relationship. It's built on a win-win relation, and it's built on partnership and trust. And Volvo had been more influenced by the US way of thinking. A part of Volvo years ago, Volvo Cars, the part that make cars, they was even sold to Ford. Of course, Volvo, the big Volvo, Volvo AB, was not. It's still a Swedish company, but they became affected of what happened in Volvo Cars. So they moved more in this US way, more and more focusing on trying to earn money on their suppliers. And in a short time perspective, it's about pushing the prices. And it worked quite okay anyhow. But when COVID came, the situation was dramatically different, because for many times Scania was able to continue to manufacture while Volvo had to stop. And the reason was, and that was something that was presented in a lot in media and so too in Sweden. The reason was, and that was said by their suppliers, that they had a completely different relation with Scania. And of course, if they had to decide, they preferred to deliver to Scania that had built a strong relation, while Volvo that just was pushing the prices and actually didn't even pay, because it was, like I said before, 90 days in the agreements with Volvo for paying, while Scania has what is stated by Swedish law, or maybe even lower, that is 30 days of payments. And of course, it was an easy choice. But this also put those two different supplier relations on an edge. So when we have a decreasing supplier market, we also, of course, have to move in another direction. We have to really focus on partnership and cooperation and long-time relations. And of course, it's obvious, but I think for many companies, it become almost like a shock, understanding that without good suppliers, it's impossible to run a business successfully. Of course, it's totally obviously, but thinking of the behaviors we have had in many organizations, how we are treating suppliers and what we are focusing on, it seems like we didn't really understand that. But now it's very obvious. So having satisfied, loyal, and trustful suppliers become more and more critical. And that also is about taking care of developing the good suppliers and leave the bad suppliers to the competitors. So we are turning into a new way of thinking, and that also increase the need of working with quality activities in supplier relations. I think what we see here today is like a shift of power within the buying organization from pure purchasing to quality, supply quality activities. And at the moment, I'm supporting a number of Swedish companies with this development. One of them is Saab, that you might know. It's another old car manufacturer. Today they don't manufacture cars. It's they are in the military industry, and it's quite interesting because due to the situation in Ukraine, of course, they have never had better days, sadly, because of the situation. But they have to expand dramatically, and to be able to do so, they of course have to have their suppliers with them, because they also have a very high amount of the value created among the suppliers. So if they should be able to expand, many of their most important suppliers also have to do big investments in new factories, new machines, and so on. And of course, that's a lot about strong relations and trust. So I think we can say that we are turning into a situation that the need to be an attractive customer and buyer becomes more important. We have always talking about being an attractive seller to attract our customers, but now it's also the opposite. Because we could see a situation starting there is an increase in competition of the best about the best suppliers, and of course they also have a choice to choose the customer that fits them mostly, and especially in this new situation, their power is shifting from almost 100% on the buying organization to more and more on the selling organization. We can also see, I think that few people think about that, but it's very difficult in many cases to replace an excellent supplier. I think we should have another view of a supplier. Historically, we often just look at the supplier of someone delivering things, but a supplier is like a network of competence. And in today's world, that we have a growing lack of competence, and it will probably be higher when we turn into the deeper and deeper into the technological breakthrough. Their new technology take over, and what we can see is that many old jobs disappear, why we get a high need of new competences, partly not even available on the market. And of course, looking or an understanding that the supplier is also depending on competence, and more critical, of course, than employing a person that's just one person, but finding a new supplier that could be thousands of employees within this supplier that should act in a good way and have the correct competence and skills and so on. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the need of really having the suppliers with us, and try to get a low turnover of supply turnover. I think is a very important measure too, and especially if we can combine that with also measuring how good they are, so we keep the best suppliers and just change the worst one. So we need also, of course, to have data then. Talking about effective supplier relations, things that are important. This is mostly nothing new, because we have seen that in some more quality-based supplier strategies. But for the average company, at least in Europe and US, it has been far away. The focus has to be on long-time partnership. Focus on lowest total cost. How to get the end customer satisfied, and development of a win-win situation where we are sharing risks and profits together. Teamwork, trust, openness, and communication regarding products, processes, skills, and different challenges we see are very critical. We need to have a more holistic perspective on the processes and cooperation and our cooperation to include the entire situation, the entire value chain. Relations as cooperation has to be in focus. As I said, loyalty, learning, continuous improvements are very important drivers of this. And we also see an increasing need for shared competence, methods, tools, especially regarding improvement work, that build like a platform for improvement cooperation. And I think it's very interesting, because if we go back in history, one of our late members of ISQ, Junichi Taguchi, Japanese statistician and quality experts, long time ago, developed the loss function that could be presented in different ways. But he was at that time already able to show that if we should succeed, we need to have this win-win situation, because the most effective situation, the lowest total cost, is always in the balance between the supplier and the customer. And if any one of them try to optimize their own situation on the cost of the others, the profit of the one that do it, in this case, the profit of the customer that tried to get some advantages out of the situation, the profit of the customer will then always be lower than the loss of the suppliers. So the optimum will always be in this cooperation. Personally, I think this is more important than ever, because it's not just about money, it's also about sustainability. Because those losses is not just money, they are in many cases also effects on our planet. Another example that I think is applicable on the situation is those two US researchers. They get the Swedish Nobel Prize 2016, Oliver Hart and Bengt Holmström, for their economical theory on contracts. And they talk a lot about the traditional contracts that is based on legal and financial agreements, but also about the movement towards what they call relation contracts. And I think we need to understand that too, because it's not enough to have the legal and the financial stuff in place. Of course, it has to be there. But it's more like an hygiene factor. We also have to take control over the relations and build the relation, and also get them into the contract situation. And as I said, I think especially the sustainability and the climate situation will affect purchasing a lot. And especially we can see from a European and US perspective with the European program Green Deal and the US Act on inflation and inflation reduction, the IRR, includes also a lot of money and a lot of new laws and so on. So not having the suppliers with us in this will create big problems. Getting a little bit more into this, I think that we also have to rethink our attitudes and so on. So I've started to use, like we talk about customer focus, I think we need also to talk about supplier focus in a similar way. Because thinking about it, if we are any organization are in have both sides, and it's I used to use this. You probably know that the golden rule. It's in probably every religion, that it's about that the way you want to be treated by yourself, you should treat others. I think what I've understood, every religion have that in some kind of principles, and I think we should use that way of thinking on suppliers too. And I express it this way: treat your suppliers the way you want your customer to treat you, because it's just the different ends of the company, and it doesn't work if you try to just to push and control and be nasty about your suppliers, and at the same time hope that your own customer will love you and build long-time relations. And of course, a strong supply chain need to connect organizations. And for me, there are three things that are very important. First of all, we need to show respect for suppliers, especially as in the same way that we often talk about showing respect for employees and so on. We need to be honest and open. We need to be professional, and we need to think about business ethics. We have to keep promises, and of course, give and take responsibility. There has to be some kind of mutual benefits and value creation here, to share things, to push the system together, to create like a team spirit together with our suppliers, and also to try to help them, to facilitate them, to simplify things, to make it easier for them to deliver. It should always be as easy as possible to deliver in the correct way. And I see that, and I will be back on that, the common improvement activities are probably the most important foundation for succeeding in this. And finally, I often talk a lot about trust and confidence. We need to trust in each other. We need to have the good intentions and to be fair. We have to build deeper relations, not just on organizational level, but also on individual, personal level, because those relations connect organizations and build a strong partnership. Of course, we also have to take care about all different supplier-related activities, and as I said earlier, become professional in our way of working with the suppliers. The need of really finding the best suppliers is more important than ever. We have to categorize them in different ways so we know exactly how to treat them, because it's impossible to build deep relations with everyone. So we need to find the more critical suppliers and so on, and using different tools for that. We probably have to expend our efforts in training and developing our suppliers and so on, or put demands that I will be back on specific knowledge that they need to have. Design for procurement is something that more and more companies talk about, how to get the suppliers into the situation as early as possible. From my experience from a number of companies, that one of the biggest problem is that suppliers come in too late, and especially today's, both with the speed of change, but also with the more complex product, it doesn't work, because we could have done things much smarter if we had listened to the voice of the suppliers much earlier and brought them into already our developing work, and get their experiences with it. Of course, that also demands a much deeper relation if it should be possible. Requirement engineering is important, but it's not just about putting requirement on products. We have more and more turn into putting requirement on processes, systems, and specific methods. And I also think that if we should be able to build stronger relation, we have to focus even more on competence and skills, especially, as I said, in improvement work. I've seen so many good examples where companies get their suppliers, especially using Six Sigma, because Six Sigma is like a global standard with the ISO 13053. It's also possible for anyone to get that training. And when you have that way of working with improvement on board your own organization, it's much easier, of course, also to start to do common improvement activities and projects with your suppliers, when both sides have the same competence, same models, and same way of working. If you put, for instance, two black belts from together, one from each organization, they know exactly what to do when starting up a project, starting with problem statement, the scope, the business case, and so on. Compared to if we don't have that common competence, it's a long journey, even if both of them are keen on improvements. Monitoring supplier performance is very interesting, and it's also very interesting because due to new technology, AI, machine learning, and so on, we get totally new opportunities to build models of our suppliers and learn how they are performing and so on. And that also, of course, could be very helpful to find the best one and develop them in deep partnership and get rid of the one that doesn't work well enough. Here, I think one of the most critical thing when deciding if a supplier is suitable or not is their ability to work with improvements. I will be back on leading and developing supplier that I see very important. We also have to have stronger connection on top management level with important suppliers. It's a little bit of a joke, but I think it's quite interesting to see. I sometimes ask, is the purchasing department the new HR department? As I said earlier, a supplier it's a framework of competence with a lot of people working there. And exactly as it's today, it's very, very critical to work with HR to get the right people on board your own organization, working in your processes. I think we have to act more closer to that. So what I see is that there are similarities, and I think we also can learn from looking at what HR are. And if we do a comparison here, we can see that many of the activities are very similar. Of course, we have different tools and so on. But if we start to think in a more supplier-focused way, it will become obvious what we have to do. First of all, we have a strategical planning process here, both for internal competence and what we could say external competence that are the suppliers. We have to recruit, or we have to identify potential good suppliers. We have to measure performance. There is things that has to do with money, even if it is salaries or if it's the payments of suppliers. We have to develop employees, and in different ways we have to develop and train our suppliers, or at least tell them what kind of knowledge they should have. Of course, here there are big differences if we talk about a small supplier compared to our own organization, or someone that is much bigger, that is more difficult to influence. We have to follow up the workplace in itself. Internally, it's about work environment. For suppliers, it's a lot about code and conduct and sustainability activities that becomes more and more important. We have to manage relations, and there is also like legal things. So in some ways we can say almost same but different. So in this way, I think we can learn things from HR, especially if we have a big step to take, depending on where supplier activities are today. And of course, moving towards an effective partnership. And some important things here is also to give recognition to the interdependency, that we really understand how we are depending in both direction, customer, supplier, and give a thought to what that really means and how it affects the way we cooperate. In the long range, starting to build shared visions, goals, and targets to align our businesses in the same direction. Anyhow, if we are in a supply chain, the end customer to succeed there is what makes everyone in the supply chain happy and successful. We need to focus more on openness and transparency in what we are doing, cooperation and collaboration, long-time commitment, and as I pointed out earlier, risk and profit sharing. And as I mentioned briefly, I see a huge effect from my own experience when we start to cooperate in improvement work. Because by running what I call cross-organizational improvement projects, that's the next step from functional process that is more internal. Cross-organizational is to me when we work together with other organizations like customer, suppliers. When we do so and solve together common problems, we not just solve the problems and become more effective, reduce the cost or increase the profit, but we also learn to know each other. And we get away from the we and them mindset that is very common in too many organizations, and build more like a we and we situation, or a win-win situation. So I think that focus has to be on connecting with important suppliers deeper into improvement work. And as I said, that also put requirements on how we should get them to develop their way of working with continuous improvement. And the easiest way to me, that is to use more normalized or standardized methods like Lean and Six Sigma. I see some companies that also develop very strong internal improvement program and try to teach them to their suppliers, and it works. But it's much more demanding and takes much more time to do. Like we did, Sandholm Associates, my company, we did a huge work some years ago for IKEA and trained all their suppliers in China in IKEA-based improvement work. We partly used Six Sigma, but IKEA wanted to have it in their own way. If we had done pure Six Sigma, it had been easier. And sometimes it also maybe just possible to say, you should run Six Sigma, and then we could just start it up, and they could have taken the responsibility for their own training and so on. Finally, I think it's also important to talk about leading suppliers. And of course, even if the power is shifting more to the suppliers, there's still some kind of natural power being the customer. The supplier exists because there is a customer. And that's also gives some opportunity to influence and affect how suppliers are working. And what I've seen worked very well in some situation is that top management start to get closer and even tell their suppliers how they like them to develop and so on. I also know a couple of quality managers that in those supplier organizations love those customers coming there, telling the executive management of the company that they have to improve not just their product, but also their way of working with quality and bring it up to top management level. And I think today, as one of the biggest challenges in most countries and in most organizations, is to really get quality strong enough on top management level, and not just even on top management level, maybe even on board level. Too many companies are a little bit fat and happy in the area of quality, but this could maybe even put a pressure on those activities on the supply level to help them to develop in a more quality-based way. And of course, that's the most important thing also for their customers, to get that kind of excellent supplies that really could deliver. So this was what I wanted to share with you here today. I hope I've given you some new ideas, and that it's something that we really have to focus on, because the world is rapidly changing in this way, and we can't handle that with we can say old strategies. We have to find new strategies that fits in this new situation. Of course, we could talk much more about that, getting into details. At the moment, I run a 12-day program for half a year for Saab, for instance, with a lot of projects beside and so on, trying to develop their supply quality managers in this way. And there are many tools and methods. But my intention for this 45 minutes was to give you some views on these topics, and I know that most of you knows many of the tools, and we have to put them in another situation and in another framework to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lars, for your elaborative explanation about this topic. Thank you very much. And we loved the one slide which you have clearly mentioned, that treat your suppliers the way you want your customer to treat you. So we take up this message. It is wonderful. And in the meantime, we request Mr. Ramanathan, if he is comfortable, can deliver a couple of words.
Don't ask me to speak. Thank you very much, Lars. I listened to you from the beginning, and it was very good. I was off video and mic for some time, but I got back to that. But I was there right from the beginning of the program, the introduction by Srinivasan and Janak. So it was a marvelous talk, and thank you for taking the time at this time in the morning. I know it must have been 6 o'clock or earlier when you started, and you're already wearing a suit. And
Actually, I'm in Portugal, so I lost another hour there. So I wake up at 4 o'clock.
Yeah. You know, in this quality month, we're looking for deep conversations, you know, from people who have been through it and done solid work on it, and therefore who have deep and profound ideas. And this is the first of this year's Quality Month talks. Every Saturday it's done. And I think you have given it a great start. I think very profound presentation on the supplier side. We normally don't get many presentations on the supplier side. In fact, among Quality Month talks of many years, this is the only one I know which is on the supplier side. So thank you for picking that topic and going into it in some depth. Really appreciate, Lars. And I'll miss you in Portugal next week, but great program. Wish you all the best.
Yeah, I know you have something that is much more important to do in Japan. So, and I know, Ram, that you understand those questions very well, because you are working a lot in the Japanese way. And when from a Japanese quality culture perspective, this is very natural, but it has been very, very hard to get it into the Western world. We are so dominated by the US short-time financial perspective, and it works in good times, and especially during globalization, but it doesn't work at all in a deglobalization and tough times, because then everything has to be built on trust.
That is a great concept too, the deglobalization that is happening now. But you know, you said the Western way of management, but I have been observing that the Scandinavian way of management is very different from the American way of management. I think we should not therefore speak of one common Western way of management.
No.
So I think the Scandinavian management is a distinct way of management, and I think it deserves to be studied better throughout the world.
Yes. Yes, we often talk about Scandinavian leadership, and it's a long. Actually, I write an article about that together with some of our colleagues, Bo Bergman and Bengt Klevsjö, trying to figure out what Scandinavian culture had meant to quality. And it's quite a lot about trust and closeness and non-hierarchical organizations and so on. Even if, as I said, from a Swedish Scandinavian point of view, the last like 25 years, we have been quite affected by the US leadership. As you probably know, many Swedish companies have gotten growing US ownership, and we also have a lot of exchange. So I think sometimes we have lost something that had been historically very successful. Things that once in a time created Swedish quality and made in Sweden to top level. Something that we haven't lost it totally, but it's not as good as it was. We are not on that absolutely top as it was like in the, especially maybe the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And I think it is connected to leadership, and the supply relations are absolutely there, because going back in history, we was not so far from the Japanese way of thinking, because we was close, we was a small country, and strong relations was necessary. But in the globalization, I think we lost something, or we turned it in the wrong way.
I think India has to learn a lot, not just from the Japanese side. I believe India has to learn from the purer form of the Scandinavian way of management, not the recent increasing influence of the Anglo-Saxon or the American way of management, which has influenced Europe much more than it has influenced your countries in Scandinavia, the northern countries. But I think it is something that we in India need to do. Perhaps ISQ can start a campaign to study and learn the Nordic way of management more than they have done before. And it's not just Japanese way of management that we need to learn. We have to learn from other countries as well. Thank you very much for that, Lars.
And I agree completely with that, Ram. And I think you and me and our colleague in the IRQ, we could be like a framework to support that kind of learnings, because we have people from all over the world, and we see those different strategies, different toolboxes, different way of thinking. And personally, we have a saying in Sweden, I don't know if it's directly translatable, but we used to say that you should pick the raisins out of the cake. And with that, we mean that we should try to find the best things from all over, because there is a lot of very, very important in the US way too. A lot of the quality learning come from there, the Six Sigma program and so on. And another thing come from Japan, and we have very interesting things in Scandinavia too. But understanding the entire situation and finding the best things and put that together to something new, I think that's a good strategy when we should take the next step.
Thank you, Lars. I promise to start by reading up a few books in the Scandinavian management way. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Ramanathan sir, for making Dr. Lars' monologue into dialogue, so that we can able to take some more questions from the participants. You set a platform. Thank you, Mr. Ramanathan. Dr. Lars, there is a FIFO we have to follow. There is a question. The first question was how shared competence works between customer and the supplier. This question is asked by Mr. Nitin. If he is allowed to speak, he can speak, or otherwise the question is this: how shared competence works between customer and supplier?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier here, I think the most critical thing is within quality, because quality is to me also the connection between organizations, the possibility to interact, and especially when we talk about improvement. So I think one of the first thing to do, that is trying to calibrate the knowledge within improvement work. And I see that is not very difficult, especially due to a concept like Six Sigma and Lean and so on, that could be like a framework for this. So I think that must be the starting point. Then it's probably many other things too that could do. It's good if it's more common and get closer, but linking organizations together to me is about improving together, and that build the good relations, and we learn to know each other, and we solve the common problems, and we get more effective together. So, yep.
Thank you. And there were a lot of appreciations, like the comparison slide between HR function and the purchasing function. Good appreciations come from this chat box. And the next question from Lakshmi Khan. How and why do you think supplier deglobalization is started? Do you think it is overall harmful to industry? Maybe the question is a little bigger.
If the deglobalization is harmful to industry, yes, I personally had preferred, of course, to have a stronger globalization. I personally is a believer that if we connect people, organizations, and countries together, that's good for the planet. And if we think about like the Taguchi loss function, if we should be able to develop in a sustainable way in the future, we have to do it together. It doesn't work if we have sub-optimations between organizations, between countries, between continents. I believe in globalization, but of course there could be some short-time advantages. For instance, of course, we what we see in Europe is that we decrease the level of transportation by deglobalization, but I think that could have been done in better ways. So I don't think it's good with the deglobalization. It's nothing that I'm in favor for, but it's the situation that we see today, and there are so many things interacting in a sad way today on the global perspective. So in short time, I have very difficult to see a change. Hopefully we will get that change. Hopefully we'll get peace. Hopefully we will get harmony in trade and other things. But sadly, it moves in the wrong direction.
Thank you. Thank you. And before we ask the third question, I think Mr. Mauli Chandra is more interested to ask something else. We can ask from him. Mauli, it is your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Highly honored and privileged that you gave me a chance. And Dr. Sorqvist, this is something like a festival. And this is a chance to meet all our gurus, friends, relatives. So good opportunity to see Mr. Janak Mehta and Mr. Ramnathan, also you. So you said your throat has a problem, but I think it got better in the last 45 minutes.
Yes.
And I wish you continue like this. It was an excellent, outstanding, I would not say it is a lecture, it is an experience sharing. It's a kind of research activity that you have shared with us. And we are currently developing the purchasing strategy as a part of our long-term strategy. And we are trying to get a lot of inputs, and at the very right time, we got fantastic input from you. And most of the questions what we had on this deglobalization and especially the relationship contracting, what you mentioned, is really wonderful. It's not just technical and commercial, but we need to look at the long-term relationship. In fact, every piece of information you gave is good. Just a confirmation, since you also put up a slide on IKEA. IKEA is just a few months here in the city where I live in Bangalore, and they're already quite famous. And a lot of people, whether they are in the upper class of the economy or slightly on the lower side of the economy, they have items for their choice. And whatever you spoke about how to treat customer, this example we can see there in that store. They offer food, they offer information, they offer the items, and including the logistic part. They take care of everything. That is something which I could connect with what you said. And I resound what Mr. Ramnathan sir said, that there's a lot for us to pick up and learn. So at this moment, no questions, but only appreciations my side. And thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mauli. We'll go on to the next question from Mr. Prakash. That do you think there should always be lower tolerance limits in accommodating deviations or poor performances, assuming the OEM have done enough to improve the supplier?
I didn't get the question totally, but if I understood it right, should it always be loyalty, even if there is not a good supplier? Was it something like that?
Maybe
of course.
Yeah, maybe Prakash, he can speak.
Yeah, Prakash, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I think
Yeah.
Mr. Lars got it very right. I meant that question that way.
Yeah. No, the number one priority is, of course, to get the best suppliers. You should build loyalty with the best and most important suppliers. And of course, your supply strategy has to be different. And of course, to be successful in this kind of world, it's important to increase the percentage of excellent suppliers. And of course, trying to get rid of the worst one. Because it's no idea to have loyalty and relations with suppliers that doesn't work. Sometimes you have to have them anyhow because there is no alternatives. I have a couple of companies that I'm working with that they have no alternatives. It's the only supplier that could do it. And then, of course, they have to do what they can to try to develop those suppliers. And in some cases that I've been into, it's almost impossible because they don't have the will, they don't have the knowledge, they don't really want to do it. And that's a very sad situation. But having a long-term strategy, trying to really work hard, find the best suppliers, and then lock with them and build strong relations. As I used to joke sometimes, leave the worst suppliers to your competitors. That's a good way of getting rid of your competitors. But try to focus on finding the best one, and be very careful about them.
Thank you, Dr. Lars. There is one more question, very lean question. What is the difference between being agile and being lean?
Yes, it's very similar. I think partly, personally, I'm a little bit against what we sometimes call buzzwords, and to me, many of those things are buzzwords. In that way, I think the Japanese way sometimes is much nicer, talking about TQM and move every good things there. In the US and even in Europe, we are very fond of finding new buzzwords. And if we look at the development today, many people talk about agile and many of the ideas in agile. And if you look at many of the methods that are used, especially in IT development, like DevOps and SafeE and so on, if you look into what they are talking about and the toolbooks, most of what's there is lean stuff. And before we started to talk about agile, people in IT industry talked a lot about lean software development. And then we moved this concept back into other areas, not just agile software development. Today we talk about agile organization. So of course there are new learnings and there is still always development, but I think it becomes a little bit difficult for people to understand when we change the branding all the time. But I think that's like the West and the US way of trying to sell things in new packages all the time. I personally think in a more stable relation to the toolbooks. And from an IIQ point of view, we always try to push that this is quality management. And of course, we should look at all those things. We should again try to pick the raisins or the cakes, because there is a lot of interesting development, but sometimes confusions arise due to all those different brands. And to me, it's very important to say that doesn't mean that those things are bad, because it's a lot of interesting in Lean Six Sigma, in agile thinking, and so on, that we need to learn. But I think we have to take it down to the ground and really see what it is about. There is in some companies like an mentality that people just want to have the brands and the buzzwords, kind of people that are talking about all those things, not really understanding what it is about. If you break it down into pieces, and if you look at the philosophies and on the tools and the methods, you can trace them very long back and see that many of those things started with Schuhart, Duran, and Deming, and so on, long time ago. And then we have had a continuous development that is very interesting. So in that way, I think it helps to know the history of quality, because if we know the history of quality, we also can understand this development, not just seeing them as the latest stuff that anyone just have to have or something like that. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Lars, because you have answered his extension question also. Thanks for that. I think Mr. Sriram got a good input from the questions he asked and your answers too. The next one is how can AI and ML be used to ensure quality and fulfillment of services? Artificial intelligence and machine learning be used to ensure quality and fulfillment of service?
Yes, it's a very interesting area, and my company, we are working a lot on that. We actually just introduced a new training program for it's like another kind of problem solving course. It's a 15 or 16-day program based on machine learning, because this new technology offers a lot of new opportunities, both to analyze data and to build models in a new way, and looking on from a supplier perspective, it's possible or to build like digital twins of suppliers and so on if you have the right data coming to you. And from an improvement perspective, we see a huge opportunity to connect machine learning, especially into the data analytics in Six Sigma. And we see that development. If you're using Minitab, you can see that already now Minitab had developed some very small and limited functions to use machine learning. Today you need to have other tools too, but I think in the next generation of even the software we mostly used in quality statistics, we will get much more opportunities to do those things. So I think it's very interesting. We have done some comparison when you do the same thing with more traditional tools, like if we do analyze a relation between different factors, doing a regression analysis, doing a machine learning application, the later gives better results and you use the data in a more effective way. So it's interesting. We take a big step here, and we are probably just in the beginning of the beginning, and a lot will happen. So it's very interesting. But anyhow, I think it's very important for quality professionals to keep up with this development, because we have, to me, a very, very important position in this, because technology in itself will not solve the situation. It's the use of technology, and the use of technology has to be about creating excellence and fulfilling the needs of our customers and developing the business in our processes. And that's our knowledge area. So to connecting technology to quality, I think makes it very, very important. Some people talk about quality 4.0 and things like that. Again, I'm a little bit critical to those buzzwords, but what's into it is very important. And to give your analytical experts that kind of knowledge, that helps. Another thing connected to that, that I also just want to point out, that's something that is extremely important when we get into this breakthrough in technology, that is data quality. Because all this technology, if it should work, also have to have trustful, correct information. And I think one of the challenges we see today, and that probably will be much bigger in the future, is that we have so much big data. The ones of you that are working with data analytics and Six Sigma, and so you probably know that when we start to dig in the databases of an organization, it's usually a lot of rubbish there, and rubbish in, rubbish out. That doesn't matter how expensive technology we have in the middle and how smart AI we have. It's not just about technology, it's also about information. IT is information and technology, and we spend a lot on technology but very little on information quality. And I think that the quality professional have to take responsibility for the data quality. And so I think that's another future area for quality professional, quality organizations, and so on, because data quality is and will become a very important governance issue for all organizations, because owning correct data is probably one of the biggest assets for future organizations. And this is another area that could bring quality to the absolute top of executive management if we get that understanding. But sadly today the understanding is quite weak. executive management are very willing to invest a lot in technology, but very little in information. But we will see the problems. I'm sure about that.
Thank you, Dr. Lars. I have one question to you from my side. Do you agree that the powerful persons in an industry is that purchasing and the supplier quality manager in comparison with the operations manager or the marketing manager?
It has changed over time, and of course it's big differences in different companies. But the last like 20 years, we have had a growing power in purchasing, and of course the purchasing manager rules quite a big part of the budget of the organization, and also from an executive perspective, very often it has been this short-time perspective. When it's a huge budget, if you can reduce the prices, of course, there is a short-time win, but it has moved in the wrong direction. I think as long as we continue, we don't know what will happen. Maybe we will turn in another general strategy and make more by ourselves. It's quite interesting if you study the US company Tesla, the electrical car manufacturing. Elon Musk, the richest person on the planet, he is focusing completely different because he's insourcing a lot of things. I don't know the actual number, it's not published, but some people said that Tesla produced like 80% of the value under their own roof. And they have a completely different strategies. And if you go back in history, like Henry Ford did the same. He wanted to own everything when he started to produce the cars in the early 1900s. And it might be that we move in another direction. I've observed in China a quite different supplier strategy and so on. There from the state of China, big companies have an goal to diversify and get and growing bigger, completely different to what we do in Europe, where we focus more and more on the core business and downsizing that way. So it depends on the strategies, but I think that the purchasing organization have a growing power, and it has grown a little bit in the wrong direction. As long as we continue doing what we are doing, it's important. But I think purchasing have to move from short-time price focus to long-time quality focus. So I think, or I believe that supply quality has a much more central position within purchasing. And that's one of the biggest challenges, because this means a big culture change within purchasing, because of course people employed in the typical purchasing department, most of them are working directly with the buying stuff, not with quality and relations, and they are grown up in a totally different cultures. It's a culture change. And I also seen in some of the companies moving in the direction I'm talking about, having internal conflicts within purchasing, because it's two different way of thinking.
Thank you, Dr. Lars. Maybe I will take out that last but not the least question.
Mm-hmm.
How to manage the challenge of quality product versus cost for power distribution company? That means a service company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is the question. How to manage the challenge of quality product versus cost for a power distribution company? That is the question. It is not a product, it's a service.
Yeah, I think there are big similarities, of course, but we are in different phases, and long time ago we had a huge debate between the difference in product quality and service quality. I think that debate had decreased a lot, and I think that's good, because I think there are more similarities than differences. And one of the things that of course makes it easier and easier to even deal with services, that is that we increase the possibility to measure. Because one of the biggest differences is that historically it has been quite easy to measure on products, the hard stuff, while services has been more difficult to see. But in today's organization, then services are mostly delivered in a digital system. We also have to have a completely different we also have a completely different opportunity to get facts. So I think we get closer, but of course there are differences, and it's not just differences between service or an electricity a company or a manufacturer of cars or something, but there is also big differences in other dimensions that are of importance. So I don't think we could copy anything, but we have to translate this way of thinking into our own business and find our way of working with it. But I think the deeper we get into it, the smaller the differences are.
Thank you, Dr. Lars, for your good explanation on the last question.